So I'm not really preaching this morning, which is code for something, and I'm not sure what. But I'm not really preaching this morning. But I do have some remarks that I want to make. And then we're going to have a time of remembrance for those whose names have been submitted, who we have lost since last Memorial Day. We're going to remember those who have been slain in Buffalo and Uvalde over these past couple of weeks. And then we're going to use the long form, well, it's not the long form, but a longer form of the communion ritual, which might be new to some of you. And so we'll kind of talk you through it a bit. But here's where I want us to go in terms of everything we're doing and in terms of the remarks that I'll be making this morning. In 1 Thessalonians, Paul says, we do not grieve as the rest of men who have no hope. Which is to say we grieve, right? It's not to say we don't grieve like the rest of the world does. No. We don't grieve as the world does, as those who have no hope. But we do grieve. And so when Paul says that, it's like, oh, so there's a way in which we grieve that's different than the world. So I think it's really important for us as followers of Jesus, for us as the church, to bear witness to the way we grieve in deeply significant ways and in ways that ultimately can bring healing. Grieve our personal losses, as you're going to see the names in the bulletin and on the screen. But also grieve our national tragedies. We need to grieve differently than the way the world does, and so bear witness to the grace and truth of Christ. So I want us to look at a passage in Matthew chapter 2, and it's going to be up on the screen for you for a little while, but let's first just read it, and then I just want to share a couple things about it. So this is from Matthew chapter 2. This is after the birth of Jesus. And so, we tell the story at Christmas time about how the Magi came from the east. And they went to Jerusalem. And they had an audience with King Herod because they had heard that one who had been born who would be king of the Jews. But Herod was king of the Jews. And so Herod wanted to know and asked the Magi to find out about the time and the place where this child was born. And then based on the intelligence that he received from the Magi, he had all the baby boys in Bethlehem that were 2 years of age and younger slaughtered, killed. And so Matthew makes reference to what has happened here, and he quotes the prophet Jeremiah. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning. It's Rachel, weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Okay, so who's Rachel and what's Ramah? So in the Old Testament, Rachel is the beloved wife of Jacob. And her name comes to be simply a reference for the mother heart of Israel. So Rachel is a reference to all of Israel, but particularly from a mother's heart. Ramah is a town just a little bit north of Jerusalem. And in 586, the empire, Babylon, had run over Israel and sacked Jerusalem, and in 3 separate waves led people into exile. Ramah was a staging area for that exile. Like the mental picture you need to get is any documentary or any movie that you've seen where in Nazi Germany they rounded up the Jewish people and took them to the trains that were going to take them to the concentration camps. And they put the families on trains, but not together, right? Like mothers and fathers and children were ripped apart, weeping and great mourning. That's what's going on in Ramah, the staging area for the deportation of sons and daughters away from their mothers and fathers in 586. So Matthew takes this occasion and he takes this reference from Jeremiah and he appropriates this same passage to what Herod is doing to the 2-year-old and under baby boys in Bethlehem after he learns of the birth of Jesus. This became known as the slaughter of the innocents. The slaughter of the innocents. And the slaughter of the innocents is played out again and again and again. Not in Bethlehem, but in Buffalo. Not in Ramah, but in Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Now, there's a way that we respond as a church, as followers of Jesus, when the slaughter of the innocents, like for Matthew, occurs within our own land. Now, this morning, I have no intention of upholding the interests of wealthy and powerful people. I have no interest in supporting those who vie and contend for the most righteous position, for those that engage in virtue signaling and grandstanding. We're not doing that. Today, I'm not even going to try to approach anything that would actually bring comfort to mothers or fathers or grief-stricken communities. Because it's the fourth line of that verse that grabs me. Refusing to be comforted. Many of you know that kind of grief. The kind of grief that says, don't even try to comfort me. I will not have it. Don't try to tell me it'll be all right, because it's not and it won't. Refusing to be comforted. There are times I think we insult people when maybe for our own benefit we say things and try to make sense of their tragedy or loss when there is no sense to be made. I think we do a disservice when we try to be the solution or solve the problem or be the answer. Nothing new is ever offered. Simply tired, predictable, sometimes cliche, sometimes trite arguments that continue to emerge. I want to look at people sometimes and just say, shh, shh. I want to look at people on my left and I want to say, shh. Right? And I want to look at people to the right of me and I want to say, shh. Just shh. I want to say, quit tweeting. quit posting, quit pontificating, quit grandstanding, quit defending, quit writing, quit reporting, quit talking. Just quit talking and start weeping. Start weeping. Church. Tears. And at least at the very beginning, just tears are all the church has to offer in a national conversation about tragedy or in personal responses to tragedy. I'm in a time of mourning with a friend, and started reading this book, Prayer in the Night, by Tish Harrison Warren. Tish Harrison Warren is a priest in the North American Anglican Church. There we go. And this book was written a couple years ago, won a lot of awards, but I just wasn't interested because I wasn't in the night. But it feels like it now. It feels like, in some ways, the sun sets. So I'm reading through this, and listen to this paragraph, especially the first line. The church's prophetic witness to an outrage culture isn't to join the outrage. That's not what she says. That's just me. Sorry. That was preaching. I'm sorry. The church's prophetic witness to an outrage culture is to be a people who know how to weep together. That's it right there. To be a people who know how to weep together at the pain and injustice of the world, both past and present, and at the reality of our sin and brokenness. We must learn to listen to the fear and sadness underneath the anger that people spew through political vitriol and digital venom. The church's prophetic witness, that's what we need to be, is to be a people who know how to weep together. And so I say, church, let's start weeping. Just weeping, not talking, just weeping. Paul told us in Romans 12, weep with those who weep. There are people weeping today. There have been people weeping this year. I'm not sure how many tears need to be shed before we've earned the right to problem solve. But I don't think it's been enough yet. Here's why. My dad had a really interesting experience. It was said before he died. Like, well, of course that was before he died. So my dad had this really interesting experience once. He was reading a book, and he came to a particular section in the book that caused him to weep. And so he took off his glasses, and he was going to wipe his eyes. But before he could wipe his eyes, he noticed that through his tears, he could look at the page in the book and see the words clearly without his glasses. He found that remarkable, and he told his doctor about it. And the doctor smiled and said, well, sure. And he said this, sometimes our tears can be the perfect corrective lens for seeing. That's where we need to be. For our tears to be the perfect corrective lens for seeing, for understanding. So let's not think that we can solve or answer or comfort or understand until we are seeing situations and seeing losses through our tears. Weep, weep with those who weep, and let there be godly sorrow that brings repentance.